The massive alien scout ship hung silently in Earth's orbit, its sleek metal surface reflecting the pale blue glow of the planet below. Inside the ship's main control room, Captain Gray stood with his arms crossed, watching the initial scan results appear on the giant screen before him. Another primitive world, he mumbled, his tall figure casting a shadow over the flashing control panel. Look at these readings. The atmosphere is absolutely terrible. The ship's science officer, Linda, moved her fingers across the holographic display, bringing up more detailed scans. Captain, these pollution levels are quite high. There's so much carbon dioxide and industrial waste in the atmosphere that it's affecting our standard readings. Captain Gray shook his head slowly. The Galactic Council had sent his team to survey this sector of space, looking for new civilizations to add to their vast alliance. But this was disappointing. Run a full species analysis, he ordered, walking around the circular command center. The other crew members, all top scientists from various advanced worlds, worked quietly at their stations. They had seen hundreds of developing worlds before, but something about Earth made them uncomfortable. Linda's voice broke the silence. Sir, I have the species report ready. According to our classifications, they're a Class 3 primitive species. They've achieved basic spaceflight, but haven't expanded beyond their own solar system. And look at this, they're still burning fossil fuels. The crew members exchanged knowing looks. In their experience, any species still relying on such primitive energy sources was centuries away from being interesting. What's really strange, continued Linda, adjusting her instruments, is that they seem to be surviving despite the toxic elements in their atmosphere. Most species we've encountered would have serious health issues in these conditions. Captain Gray moved closer to the main screen, his eyes narrowing as he studied the data. The humans below seemed oblivious to their ship, their cities glowing in the night side of the planet, their vehicles moving about like tiny insects. Record this in the official log, he commanded. Earth Species Assessment. Class 3 Primitive Civilization. Notable characteristics: poor environmental management, limited technological advancement, ongoing dependence on fossil fuels. Recommendation: limited contact only. They're clearly not ready for full integration into the galactic community. As he spoke, more data streamed across the screens. The ship's AI was analyzing centuries of Earth's atmospheric history, though the crew paid little attention to these deeper readings. They had already made up their minds about humanity's worth. Should we establish any contact at all? Asked Tom, the ship's diplomatic officer. He was younger than the others, and this was his first survey mission. The Council's protocols suggest at least a cursory meeting with their leaders. Captain Gray considered this for a moment. Send a message to the Council. Tell them we found a developing world that might be worth basic diplomatic relations. Nothing more. He paused, looking at the blue planet again. And make a note about their atmosphere. Any species that allows their world to reach this state clearly lacks the discipline and foresight needed for advanced civilization. The message was sent, and the crew prepared to move on to their next survey target. None of them noticed the subtle patterns in the atmospheric data that kept scrolling across their screens. Hidden in those numbers was the story of humanity's rise, each layer of the atmosphere containing traces of human resilience, adaptation, and determination. As the ship prepared to break orbit, Linda made one final observation. It's almost sad, isn't it? They're slowly poisoning themselves, and they don't even seem to care. Captain Gray nodded in agreement. Some species just aren't meant for greatness. Mark this sector as low priority and set course for the next survey point. The massive scout ship turned gracefully away from Earth, its engines glowing softly as it prepared for faster-than-light travel. Behind them, humanity continued its daily life, unaware that they had just been judged and dismissed by one of the most powerful civilizations in the galaxy. Little did the aliens know, their quick assessment had missed the most remarkable thing about humans, their incredible ability to adapt and thrive in conditions that would break most other species. Their greatest mistake wasn't in their measurements, but in what they failed to understand about the story those measurements told. 2 weeks after the initial scout ship's visit, the United Nations building in New York buzzed with nervous energy. World leaders had gathered in the General Assembly Hall, waiting for humanity's first official contact with alien life. The air was thick with tension and excitement. Ambassador Marcus of the Galactic Council stood backstage, reviewing his notes with barely hidden boredom. He had done this dozens of times before, greeting primitive species, establishing basic diplomatic relations, then moving on to more important matters. Earth would be no different. Dr. Thompson, Earth's leading atmospheric scientist, watched the alien diplomat from her seat in the front row. Something about their visitors bothered her. Their scanning devices, which they claimed were standard diplomatic tools, seemed unusually focused on air quality readings. Distinguished leaders of Earth, Ambassador Marcus began, his translator device making his words sound slightly metallic. The Galactic Council has deemed your world worthy of basic diplomatic contact. He paused, looking around the room with what could only be described as pity. Though we must be honest about your current situation. The massive screen behind him lit up with atmospheric data. Your species has filled its atmosphere with pollutants, toxins, and waste products. This alone tells us much about your level of development. His tone was that of a teacher scolding young children. Dr. Thompson frowned. The data on the screen wasn't wrong, but something about the way it was presented seemed off. Years of studying Earth's atmosphere had taught her that there was always more to the story than raw numbers. We are willing to establish limited trade relations, Marcus continued. Perhaps we can even help you with some of your more pressing environmental issues. The condescension in his voice was clear, making several world leaders shift uncomfortably in their seats. The UN Secretary General stood up. We appreciate your offer, Ambassador. But I believe you may be missing some context about Earth's development. Marcus smiled politely, the kind of smile adults give to children who say something cute but wrong. The numbers speak for themselves. A truly advanced civilization would never allow their planet to reach this state. Dr. Thompson couldn't stay quiet any longer. She raised her hand, and when acknowledged, stood up. Ambassador, I notice your scanning equipment seems particularly interested in trace elements in our atmosphere. May I ask why? For the first time, Marcus looked slightly uncertain. Standard protocol. Nothing more. Because, Dr. Thompson continued, if you're measuring what I think you're measuring, you're not just seeing pollution. You're seeing the story of our civilization written in the air itself. Marcus's polite smile faltered slightly. He hadn't expected any meaningful scientific discourse from these primitives. I assure you, we understand atmospheric science far better than. Then you know, Dr. Thompson interrupted, that each layer of our atmosphere contains traces of every major step in human development. From the first time we used fire to the Industrial Revolution to the modern age. It's not just pollution. It's a record of our progress. The alien ambassador's expression changed almost imperceptibly. He quickly changed the subject, moving on to discuss basic trade protocols, but Dr. Thompson noticed his scanning device was now taking more detailed readings. As the meeting continued, news reporters broadcasted the historic event worldwide. People everywhere watched with mixed emotions as their first alien contact seemed to view them with such obvious disdain. But in a quiet corner of the assembly hall, a junior alien scientist named Reed was staring at his readings with growing confusion and concern. The human scientist's words had prompted him to look deeper, and what he was finding in Earth's atmospheric data didn't match anything in their experience. The meeting ended with the establishment of minimal diplomatic ties. As the aliens left, Dr. Thompson watched them go, noticing how their scanning devices never stopped taking readings. She smiled slightly, knowing that sooner or later they would have to realize that what they saw as weakness might just be evidence of humanity's greatest strength. Research Director Reed sat in his lab aboard the alien diplomatic ship, staring at his screens with growing amazement. For 3 days straight, He had been analyzing the detailed atmospheric readings from Earth, and what he found was turning everything they thought they knew about humans upside down. "This can't be right," he muttered, running the tests again. The lab's white walls were covered with holographic displays showing layers of Earth's atmosphere, each telling a different story about human history. The door slid open with a soft hiss. Ambassador Marcus walked in, looking irritated. "Please tell me you have something useful. That human scientist's comments at the UN have made some council members uncomfortable." Reed turned to face his superior, his expression serious. "Sir, we made a terrible mistake in our assessment of humans." He gestured to the nearest display. "Look at this layer of the atmosphere. See these trace elements? That's from their first experiments with bronze smelting." Marcus frowned. So these elements are still there, thousands of years later. And here, Reed pointed to another screen. These particles show their first large-scale use of iron. And here, the Industrial Revolution. Every major step in their technological development is recorded in their atmosphere. "That's hardly impressive," Marcus scoffed. "Many species leave marks on their atmosphere as they develop." Reed shook his head vigorously. "You don't understand. Most species either develop clean technology early or poison themselves to extinction. But humans, they kept going. They adapted. Look at these readings from their 20th century. Massive pollution, radiation from nuclear tests, chemical warfare agents." He pulled up more data. Any other species would have died out or given up. But humans, they just kept adapting and advancing. Their bodies actually evolved to handle higher pollution levels. They developed technologies to clean their air, then made those technologies better when they failed. Ambassador Marcus's expression changed as he looked closer at the data. "Are you saying?" "Yes," Reed interrupted, too excited to maintain proper protocol. "What we dismissed as primitive pollution is actually a record of unprecedented resilience. These humans have survived conditions that would have wiped out most Class 1 species." He brought up a comparison chart. "Look at the Centaurians. They abandoned industrial development when their air got too dirty. The Proximes went extinct when they couldn't handle their industrial pollution. But humans, they just kept pushing forward, adapting, solving problems, surviving." Marcus stared at the displays, his earlier arrogance replaced by growing concern. "The Council needs to know about this immediately. If humans are this adaptable." "There's more," Reed said, pulling up new data. "Remember their nuclear weapons tests? The radiation levels should have made large areas uninhabitable, but they developed techniques to clean radiation from soil and water. They learned to build better containment systems. They turned their mistakes into opportunities for advancement." The ambassador's face had gone pale. "So when we classified them as primitive because of their polluted atmosphere, we completely misread the situation," Reed finished. "Their polluted atmosphere isn't a sign of weakness or technological backwardness. It's a record of their incredible journey. Every crisis, every challenge, every potential extinction event, they survived it all and got stronger." A junior scientist burst into the lab, holding a data pad. "Director Reed, we just finished analyzing the deep atmospheric samples. You need to see this." Reed grabbed the pad, his eyes widening as he read. "This is impossible. According to these readings, humans have survived at least 5 major extinction-level events that should have wiped them out. They don't just survive disasters, they thrive because of them." Ambassador Marcus sank into a nearby chair, the full implications hitting him. They had dismissed humans as primitive because they fought through their problems instead of avoiding them. But in doing so, humans had achieved something none of the Council's species ever had. They had become virtually unkillable. The ambassador looked out the ship's window at the blue planet below. For the first time since arriving, he felt something he never expected to feel toward Earth's inhabitants: respect, and maybe just a little bit of fear. The emergency meeting of the Galactic Council was unlike anything seen in recent memory. Representatives from 50 advanced civilizations sat in the grand circular chamber, their attention fixed on the holographic display showing Earth's atmospheric data. Research Director Reed stood at the center, presenting his findings to the stunned audience. Behind him, Ambassador Marcus watched nervously, aware that their initial dismissal of humans now seemed like a dangerous mistake. As you can see, Reed explained, pointing to a complex graph, humans didn't just survive their industrial age. They thrived in it. While our civilizations developed clean technology first and then industrialized, humans did something completely different. An elder council member leaned forward. Are you suggesting we should admire their primitive approach? Primitive. Reed shook his head. Let me show you something. He pulled up an image of London during the Industrial Revolution, thick with smog and pollution. This should have killed them. Any normal species would have either abandoned their cities or died out. He switched to a modern image of the same city. But look what they did instead. They adapted. Their bodies evolved to filter toxins better. They developed air cleaning technology. They learned to live in conditions that would kill most of us instantly. The council chamber erupted in murmurs. A tall delegate from a crystal-based civilization stood up. But surely this makes them more primitive, not less. They poison their world instead of protecting it. Reed smiled. That's what we thought too. But we were wrong. Humans don't just survive problems. They get stronger because of them. He displayed a new set of data. Look at their response to climate change. Instead of giving up when their atmosphere began changing, they developed weather control technology. Their pollution crisis led to atmospheric scrubbing devices that are more advanced than anything we have. Ambassador Marcus stepped forward. Honorable Council, I must add something. When we first contacted Earth, we thought their polluted atmosphere was a sign of weakness. We were seeing the situation backward. Their atmosphere isn't polluted because they're primitive. It's marked by their victories. The chamber grew quiet as Reed displayed one final piece of evidence. This is the most remarkable thing we discovered. Humans have something none of our species have: generational resilience. Each crisis they survive makes the next generation stronger. He pointed to specific data points. See these markers? Radiation from their nuclear age. Their children adapted to it. Industrial pollutants. Their bodies evolved to process them. Atmospheric changes. They adjusted their cities and biology to match. What are you saying? Asked the council leader, their voice concerned. I'm saying, Reed took a deep breath, that we may have just discovered the most resilient species in the galaxy. While we avoided challenges, they charged straight through them. While we kept our worlds pristine, they learned to survive anything. They didn't just endure, they turned survival into an art form. The council chamber burst into chaos as the implications became clear. A species that could adapt to anything, that grew stronger from crisis instead of weaker, that turned planetary pollution into evolutionary advantage. It was unprecedented. Ambassador Marcus watched the council's reaction, remembering his own arrogant dismissal of humans just weeks ago. Now he understood why Dr. Thompson had smiled when they ignored her warning. Humans hadn't just survived their challenges. They had turned those challenges into their greatest strength. A young council member spoke up over the noise. But what does this mean for the galaxy? Reed looked at the Earth data one more time. It means we need to completely change how we view humans. We thought they were primitive because they fought through their problems instead of avoiding them. But that fight gave them something unique: the ability to survive virtually anything the universe throws at them. The council chamber fell silent as the truth sank in. They hadn't discovered a primitive species poisoning itself. They had found something far more interesting: a species that had turned adversity itself into a weapon of advancement. The warning came too late. As the Galactic Council debated the implications of humanity's remarkable adaptability, another alien force had been watching and listening. The Dominion, an aggressive species known for testing other civilizations' strengths, had intercepted the Council's transmissions about Earth. If these humans are as adaptable as the Council claims, growled Commander Black of the Dominion fleet, Then they should prove it. His massive warship hung in Earth's orbit, hidden by advanced cloaking technology. On Earth, the first signs of trouble appeared over New York. A strange, greenish mist began descending from the sky. Within hours, similar reports came from London, Tokyo, Mumbai, and dozens of other major cities worldwide. In the UN Emergency Command Center, Dr. Thompson stared at the atmospheric readings with growing concern. These toxins, they're like nothing we've seen before. She turned to face the room full of world leaders and emergency response teams. But they're not entirely unfamiliar either. The big screen showed red dots appearing across the globe as more cities reported the alien chemical attack. But instead of panic, something unexpected happened. Decades of dealing with industrial accidents, chemical spills, and environmental disasters had prepared humanity for this moment. The particles are similar to the sulfur dioxide crisis we handled in 32, said one expert, already pulling up response protocols. We can modify our atmospheric scrubbers to handle this. It's got elements like the acid rain we dealt with in the past, another scientist added. Our water treatment systems can be adapted to handle the fallout. Dr. Thompson watched in pride as teams worldwide sprang into action. In New York, emergency response teams deployed mobile air filtration units developed after the chemical plant explosion of 28. In Tokyo, they activated the city-wide atmospheric protection system originally designed for severe pollution days. Above Earth, Commander Black watched in confusion. How are they responding so quickly? These toxins should have caused chaos. But humanity had learned from every disaster they'd ever faced. In London, children calmly put on air filtration masks, standard equipment in every home since the air quality crisis of 25. In Mumbai, massive air purification towers, built to combat urban pollution, switched to emergency mode. Sir, one of Black's officers reported, they're not just surviving the toxins, they're cleaning them from their atmosphere. Around the world, humans demonstrated why they had survived every crisis they'd ever faced. Factory workers used industrial safety protocols developed over centuries of working with hazardous materials. Cities activated emergency ventilation systems designed for pollution emergencies. Hospitals implemented procedures created for chemical accidents. The Dominion's attack, meant to prove humans weak, was instead proving the Council's discovery correct. Humanity wasn't just surviving. They were fighting back with the accumulated knowledge of generations of overcoming environmental challenges. Dr. Thompson coordinated with teams globally, using satellite networks to track the toxin spread. Every major city already has systems in place to handle atmospheric threats. She explained to the UN Council, "We built them because we had to clean up our own pollution. Now they're saving us from alien toxins." Commander Black watched in disbelief as his perfect weapon was systematically neutralized. Cities activated massive air scrubbers. Emergency teams deployed chemical neutralizing agents. Even civilians showed a disturbing familiarity with emergency protocols. "Impossible," he muttered as readings showed the toxin levels dropping. No species should be this prepared for an atmospheric attack. But humans were prepared, precisely because they had spent their entire history dealing with atmospheric threats, most of them self-created. Every industrial accident, every chemical spill, every air quality crisis had taught them something. And now, faced with an alien attack, they were using those hard-learned lessons to survive. In the UN Center, Dr. Thompson allowed herself a small smile as the crisis response continued. The aliens had chosen the wrong weapon. They had attacked humanity with poison in the air, and if there was one thing humans knew how to handle, it was exactly that. Professor Miller stood in the Global Response Center, surrounded by screens showing real-time data from cities worldwide. As Earth's leading expert on atmospheric crisis management, he had spent decades preparing for major environmental disasters. He never expected to use those skills against an alien attack. Report from Tokyo called out an operator. Their modified pollution control systems have cleared 60% of the alien toxins from their sector. Miller nodded, his eyes fixed on the global map. Bright lines showed the flow of information and resources between cities as humanity mounted its counterattack. Years of fighting climate change had created a worldwide network of environmental monitoring and response systems. Now that network was being used for something entirely different. London is requesting the new filter formula, another operator announced. Their atmospheric processing plants are ready for the upgrade. In orbit, Commander Black of the Dominion watched with growing frustration as his attack continued to fail. How are they doing this? These are primitive humans. His science officer looked uncomfortable. Sir, they're using technology they developed to clean their own pollution. It seems their history of environmental problems has turned them into experts at atmospheric crisis management. Black finished, finally understanding. His perfect weapon had backfired spectacularly. Back on Earth, Professor Miller received an urgent call from Dr. Thompson at the UN. The satellite network is picking up something new, she reported. The Dominion ships are preparing a second wave of toxins. Different composition this time. Miller smiled slightly. They still don't understand. Patch me through to all response centers. On screens across the globe, Miller's face appeared before emergency teams. The enemy is changing tactics, he announced. But remember, we've spent centuries learning to adapt to changing atmospheric threats. Time to show them what that means. In New York, teams modified air filtration systems originally designed for urban smog. In Beijing, massive atmospheric processors, built to combat industrial pollution, were recalibrated within minutes. Each city used its unique experience with environmental challenges to fight back. Sir, Black's officer called out in alarm. They're not just surviving the new toxins. They're breaking them down into harmless components. Commander Black watched in disbelief as humans demonstrated mastery over atmospheric science that rivaled advanced civilizations. Every failed attack taught them more about Dominion technology. Every defense they created worked better than the last. Professor Miller coordinated the global response, drawing on humanity's long history of environmental innovation. Mumbai, deploy your monsoon control systems. They can help disperse the toxins. Sydney, your bushfire atmospheric purifiers can handle the eastern sector. The Galactic Council's ships arrived just in time to witness humanity's triumph. They watched as a species they had dismissed as primitive demonstrated unprecedented mastery over atmospheric threats. Remarkable, Ambassador Marcus whispered, standing on his ship's observation deck. They've turned their greatest weakness into an impenetrable defense. Hour by hour, the alien toxins were eliminated. City after city reported clear skies as human technology, developed through centuries of fighting their own pollution, proved more than capable of handling the alien threat. Professor Miller finally allowed himself to relax as the last traces of toxins were neutralized. Send word to every city, he instructed. The attack has failed. Humanity's environmental defense network has proven itself. In orbit, Commander Black faced a difficult realization. His fleet had been defeated not by advanced alien technology, but by human systems designed to clean up industrial pollution and combat climate change. As the Dominion ships retreated, Ambassador Marcus contacted Earth. The Council owes humanity an apology, he admitted. We thought your atmospheric challenges were a sign of weakness. Instead, they prepared you for threats we never imagined possible. Professor Miller's response was simple. Sometimes the best way to handle a crisis isn't to avoid it. It's to learn from it. Humanity has been learning for a very long time. 1 month after the Dominion's failed attack, the Grand Chamber of the Galactic Council looked very different from before. Instead of looking down on the human representatives, the alien delegates now showed clear respect. At the center of the chamber, Ambassador Marcus stood to make a historic announcement. After careful consideration, he began, his voice echoing through the vast space. The Council officially recognizes Earth as a Class 1 resilient species. He paused, looking at the human delegation. We were wrong in our initial assessment, and recent events have proved just how wrong we were. Dr. Thompson and Professor Miller sat among the Earth's representatives, both hiding small smiles. Behind them, Research Director Reed nodded in approval, his earlier discoveries now proven beyond any doubt. "But we're not just here to correct our mistake," Marcus continued. "We're here to ask for help." A murmur of surprise ran through the chamber. The proud Galactic Council, asking humans for help. Many of the alien delegates shifted uncomfortably in their seats. "Across our galaxy, dozens of worlds face environmental crises," Marcus explained. "We've always tried to solve these problems with pure technology, keeping our atmospheres pristine. But humans," he gestured to the Earth delegation, "you've learned something we never did. You've learned how to adapt, survive, and thrive in changing conditions." Professor Miller stepped forward at Marcus's invitation. The screens around the chamber lit up with images of Earth's cities, showing their environmental management systems in action. "What you see as our greatest weakness, our history of pollution and environmental challenges, gave us our greatest strength," Miller explained. "We didn't just survive our mistakes, we learned from them. Each crisis taught us something new. Each challenge made us more resilient." Dr. Thompson joined him, bringing up new data. "Your civilizations avoided environmental problems. We faced them head-on and developed solutions. Now we can help other worlds do the same." The council leaders stood, their formal robes shimmering. "We offer Earth full membership in the Galactic Council, with a special role. Your species will lead our new planetary rehabilitation division." Around the chamber, screens showed dozens of worlds in crisis. Some faced industrial pollution, like Earth's past. Others struggled with atmospheric degradation or chemical contamination. All of them could benefit from humanity's hard-earned experience. "The very things you once looked down on us for," Dr. Thompson said. "Our pollution, our environmental battles, our constant adaptation. They're exactly what the galaxy needs now." Ambassador Marcus nodded. "You've turned survival itself into an art form. While we feared change, you embraced it. While we avoided problems, you solved them. The galaxy needs that spirit more than ever." The chamber erupted in applause as the Earth delegation accepted their new role. The same humans who had been dismissed as primitives just months ago would now lead the effort to save worlds across the galaxy. "But remember," Professor Miller added as the celebration continued, "we're not special because we're perfect. We're special because we never let our imperfections stop us. Every mistake taught us something. Every crisis made us stronger." As the ceremony concluded, Dr. Thompson looked out at the gathered representatives of 1,000 worlds. She remembered the first day the aliens had arrived, how they had sneered at Earth's polluted atmosphere. Now they understood. That pollution wasn't a sign of failure, but a mark of humanity's incredible journey. "So," she said to the assembled council, "who's ready to learn how to turn their weaknesses into strengths?" The response was unanimous. Across the galaxy, worlds that had hidden from their problems were ready to learn from the species that had faced them head-on. Humanity's greatest failures had become their greatest gift to the universe. The knowledge that true strength doesn't come from avoiding challenges, but from learning to overcome them. The age of human wisdom had begun, and the galaxy would never be the same.